What's up? How you doing today? Tuesday, June 29, 2021. Making pork chops. Get some jalapenos here. And I don't know if you can see that corn. And my kids love John Henry's pecan rub. So we're going to use that. It's very good, highly recommended. Put a little bit extra. You can never put too much. So we flip them around. That's it. I'm gonna roast the jalapenos. These are delicious, very delicious. So I roast them, I put them in a paper bag, let them sit there for 7 minutes, and then I peel the skin off, cut them up with the seeds. I like the seeds. Some people, they don't like the seeds. They're afraid the seeds are gonna grow inside them. I like the seeds. And then I cut them up, eat them. Very tasty. You know what, I'm going to try some of this pecan rub John Henry's on my corn. So, give it a shot. The jalapenos we leave as is. They don't need any modification. These taste good on their own. Alright, so everything's it's all set for the fire. Just letting it sit for a little bit. And then we'll start cooking. So I was thinking about that movie Rocky 3, which I like, but there's a few things that seem to be out of place in that movie. Not out of place, they just don't fit. They're out of place, yeah. His weight, for one. Who believes that Rocky in that movie, Sylvester Stallone, is a heavyweight? It does not look like a heavyweight to me now. When I was a kid and I saw it, he looked, you know, big, because you're young and little, and anything bigger than you looks large, but he's not a heavyweight in that. I know in real life he wasn't a heavyweight either, but how do you play in a movie where you look like a welterweight playing a heavyweight? I mean, he's like 150, 155 pounds in that movie. And he's a stick with arms. That's basically what it comes down to. Stick with arms. and he's fighting Clubber Lang, James Clubber Lang. Now, Mr. T could pass for a heavyweight, but Rocky, no, you cannot pass for a heavyweight. And then the other thing I always think about in that movie, how come Clubber Lang never got a rematch? It's 1-1. You owe the guy a rematch. Did they not in those days put rematch clauses in their contracts? I never understood, you know, Rocky lost the first fight. Clubber Lang lost the second fight. There should have been a third fight. Somebody would say, well, it wasn't close, that's why, you know, maybe if it went the distance. Apollo and Rocky went the distance in part 2. There was no rematch, except for that fake rematch at the end of Rocky 3, where in the movie Apollo Creed there, what's his name there, Adonis asks Rocky who won that fight, and Rocky says that Apollo won it. That sounds ridiculous. I mean, the writer of the Apollo Creed movie should not have put that line in there. Creed could not beat Rocky, and the reason is he had sustained internal injuries. That's the whole reason why he retired in part 2. Retired in part 2 because of internal bleeding. And then he taught Rocky everything he knew. He said that. So how does he beat Rocky in a match where Rocky is in the best shape of his life? And why would you fight him behind closed doors? He agrees to fight you. Why not make it an event? After all, he does complain about how silent it is once you retire. That never made any sense to me. And then he goes home in part 4, continuation from 3, with a little bruise. Rocky has a little baby bruise under his eye. And you're telling me that little bruise, that's how Apollo won that fight, with that little baby bruise? Ridiculous. No referee, nothing in there. You get a little bruise, Apollo wins the fight. You know, if you look at the results from 1 and 2, the beating on their faces was enormous. And now Apollo wins with a little scrape, little, you know, mouse under the eye of Rocky. Totally asinine. Lucky Apollo didn't die in Mickey's gym that night. And why he came back in Rocky 4 to fight, what's his name there? Dolph Lundgren, Drago, Ivan Drago. You retired for a reason. You were bleeding inside, which means you had sustained internal damage to your organs probably. And then you decide you're going to fight this crazy guy from Russia. Anyway, but like I said, my biggest thing is in Rocky 3 that Stallone does not look like a heavyweight, especially from the perspective of looking at it now, from these eyes, the older version of me. Does not look like a heavyweight, looks like a skinny man. And then the other thing is Clubber Lang definitely should have gotten a rematch. And why is Clubber Lang considered to be the bad guy in that movie? He didn't do anything wrong. Clubber Lang was he ranked number 1? He was ranked number 1. And Rocky had no idea that there was a guy named Clubber Lang who was ranked number 1 looking for a match with him. Didn't know this. Never watched television. Never picked up a paper. Nobody said to him, hey, why don't you fight that Clubber Lang guy? You know, we saw an interview with him on television. He wants to fight you. Nobody mentioned this to Rocky. Adrian never saw anything on television and said, hey, that guy wants to fight you. Only Mickey knew. Mickey was the only one that knew Rocky, that knew about Clubber Lang. Whole thing's ridiculous. And how do you deny this guy a chance to fight you? He's ranked number 1. In today's boxing world, they would strip you of the title and you would go home crying like a baby. Clubber Lang deserved a match. You shouldn't have to run around finding Rocky at a statue to humiliate him and his wife in order for Rocky to accept the challenge. This guy's ranked number 1. You're denying him the opportunity to fight you? That's ridiculous. But, you know, I mean, anybody who, you know, like when Rocky was filming those you know, silly commercials, somebody would have said to him, hey, why don't you fight Clubber Lang, man? This guy's all over the place. He wants to fight you. But he discovers that Clubber Lang exists when they're dedicating the statue to Rocky. Then and only then does he realize Clubber Lang is a real fighter, because Mickey kept it a secret from him. It's like, where's Rocky living? In a tunnel somewhere? Underground? Doesn't know anything? So that's always bothered me. You know, that he didn't give him a shot at the title. And what happened to his bad eye? He had a bad eye. Couldn't see well. Detached retina, right? And all of a sudden, after Rocky III, there's no mention of the bad eye. Now he sees like a beagle. Yeah. But I like the series. I did not like part 5 though. Did not like part 5. Ridiculous acting. Stallone's acting in that was asinine. It was that over-the-top, jittery kind of acting. I do not like that acting. And I don't even know why that resembled brain damage to him. He said, well, in Rocky V, Rocky has brain damage. First of all, supposedly it was a misdiagnosis, because in Rocky Balboa, they told him that the results were not accurate because the tests they give these days are more accurate, and those tests weren't accurate. So he apparently didn't have brain damage. So why was he talking all, you know, jumpy and hyper? And when you get brain damage, you talk slower, and you can't end your sentences. You're constantly losing your train of thought. He had the opposite effect. He had brain damage where his brain was fast. Ridiculously. And I'll tell you one thing that bothers me about Rocky 1. I've seen Stallone a few times, and I want to tell him, you know what? You don't catch a cold because it's cold outside. You catch a cold because a virus gets into your system. You think, you know, he's old enough to know that? It's not the cold air that gives you a cold. It's the rhinovirus. But in Rocky 1, he tells Adrian that it's a cold night, and it's a good night to catch pneumonia. You don't catch pneumonia because it's cold outside. You have to come in contact with the organism, and then you'll catch pneumonia if your immune system is down. But you don't catch it just because it's cold outside. You can get hypothermia because it's cold outside, or frostbite, but you don't get sick like a common cold or pneumonia because it's cold outside. That's been disproven 1,000,000 times over, and he keeps repeating that line. I've heard him in other movies, and I think he said something similar to that in Rocky Balboa. But anyway, if you don't come in contact with the microbe or the virus, you will not get sick. If I'm alone and I'm not sick and it's freezing, I go to Antarctica for a month, I will not get sick from, you know, I will not get sick from like the rhinovirus, because I'm the only one there. It's transmittable human to human. I may get frostbite or hypothermia, but that's different. So, you know, I've always wanted to tell him, stop saying that. Sounds ridiculous. You don't get pneumonia because it's cold outside. You can get pneumonia when it's hot outside. If you're in a room with some people that have it and they pass it on to you, for example, in Rocky 1, there's a scene where he wants to make out with Adrian in his little apartment there, right on like the bed area there, and she's not kissing him back, and he says to her, you can, I'll kiss you. You don't have to kiss me back if you don't want to. But when the camera wasn't rolling, he noticed that she was hesitating. She wasn't kissing him, and he said to her, what's the matter? And she said, I have the flu. I don't want to pass it on to you. If you think the flu is caused by the cold, you should have said to her, well, this room is nice and toasty. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to get the flu from you. But anyway, he says, don't worry about it. What's he going to tell? Let's wait until you heal. So he says, don't worry about it. They make out, and he ended up getting pneumonia. pneumonia, sorry, the flu. I got pneumonia on my mind, but he got the flu, and he went to the hospital because of it. You think that would have taught him a lesson? He would have said, yeah, it's not the cold, it's the person who's infected, that you're sucking in their saliva or breathing in their little droplets when they sneeze. That's how you get sick. And once again, sick from pneumonia, sick from the common cold, which is caused by over 200 viruses, rhinoviruses, is different from hypothermia or frostbite. They're not, he doesn't say, hey, good night to get frostbite, or good night to get hypothermia. He doesn't say that. He says, Adrian, you know what? Cold night out there. It's a good night to get pneumonia. So anyway, that's inaccurate. That's how stories get started. But you know, if you ask people, majority of people think you get sick from cold air. You know, my father would say, hey, put on a hat, you're going to catch a cold. Even people younger than me say the same thing. You know, they'll be like, oh, it was cold and I got sick. No, you didn't get sick because of that. You came in contact with someone who was sick, you didn't know it, and they gave it to you. You think people would know that all this time with the coronavirus? You know, it's person to person. That's the only way you can get corona. That's the same thing with the common cold. Same exact way of transmission. So, you know, Stallone apparently doesn't know that, so I don't know. Anyway, I want to put these on and get them grilling. Good night to catch pneumonia.